The New York Giants are stuck in a vicious cycle that continues to undermine their chance of success. I'll explain what that is coming up next on the Locked On Giants podcast.
You are Locked On Giants, your daily New York Giants podcast, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Hello, New York Giant fans, and welcome to another edition of the Locked On Giants podcast, part of the Locked On Podcast family, your team every day. I'm your host, Patricia Traina, credential member of the New York Giants media for Locked On, as well as for New York Giants on SI, which is where you can find all of my written work. And as always, we welcome on in our Blue Crew community members, our everydayers, our newcomers, and everybody in between. Thank you so much for spending part of your day with us here on the Locked On Giants podcast. And if you happen to be making us your first listen of the day, we appreciate that as well. Today's episode of Locked On Giants is brought to you by our friends at FanDuel. Right now, new customers can bet just $5. And if your bet wins, you'll get $300 in bonus bets to use across the app. All right, Giant fans, I've been thinking about Sunday's game. Why, I don't know, because it was just aggravating. But in thinking about it and just trying to figure out who are these Giants, okay? What direction are they going in? It's like they tease us a little bit with good stuff and then they go back. And I came up with, they just keep making the same mistakes over and over. And I'm talking big picture. So we're going to look at those mistakes, big picture mistakes in the first segment. Then in segment 2, defensive coordinator Shane Bowen, as I record this, is safe. So we'll talk a little bit about that and a concern I have growing, not just, with the defensive play, but just an overall concern with that decision. And then finally, I want to talk about Brian Daboll's job because, a lot of people are under the impression that because he broke the emergency glass, so to speak, started Jackson Dart, and Jackson Dart has been doing so well that maybe Daboll saved his job. I don't know about that. And we'll talk about that once we get to segment 3. So it's going to be a deep dive into some philosophies and just, looking at some of what has transpired from a larger, from a big picture perspective. So let's get into it. The Giants, you look at this team and they talk about their processes and how they, believe in sticking to the process. And I just think they keep making the same organizational and philosophical mistakes over and over, and they don't learn. And I think that is probably the most frustrating thing about this Giant team is that, you make a mistake, okay, you learn from it and you move on. But this team seems to make the same mistakes over and over. So what do I mean by that? There are a few, okay? I'm going to start off with the kicker situation. So they had Graham Gano kick against the Jets with a bad knee, lost that game. Then they bring a hobbled Graham Gano into the Washington game, and he ends up getting hurt, and they don't have a kicker. They did the same thing again with twice actually this year. Gano was injured, and they basically didn't have a solid kicker option for the game against Kansas City. And then, oh, by the way, with Jude McIntyre, last week, not, against Denver, but the week before against Philadelphia, he missed the PAT. And still, they went with him. All right? If your kicker can't hit a PAT, something's wrong. And, it's interesting because you look at the game on Sunday against the Broncos. There were long field goal attempts of 58 and 59 yards there for the making if they had a reliable kicker, which they did not. So what did the Giants do? They ended up punting because, McIntyre, he has only attempted, I think, as long as 31 yards. So they obviously, maybe didn't trust him to hit those long distance field goals. So why continue to just take shortcuts with that at that position? I don't understand why they haven't learned their lesson with the kicker. And it's come back to hurt them multiple times. And it's inexcusable. All right. Now, another thing, another mistake that they seem to have on repeat is sticking with Shane Bowen. You look at the Dallas game. Shane Bowen admitted he could have been a little bit more aggressive. So then against Philadelphia, he comes out and he's more aggressive and everybody's happy. The Giants played well. What does he do against Denver? Goes right back into the passive shell, that prevent defense that doesn't work. How many times do you need for a person to make the same mistake before you say, okay, enough is enough? With this Giant team, it just seems to be like they keep giving guys second chances, third chances, fourth chances. It's like, how many chances can you give somebody before you finally say to yourself, this ain't working. We got to go in a different direction. Giants are just, I don't know, maybe too trusting. Maybe they like giving people the benefit of the doubt. I don't know the answer, but it's hurting them. Okay. Another big mistake, giving certain draft picks scholarships. Evan Neal has not suited up all year. Okay. He hasn't gotten into a game that I remember this year. Why is he still on the roster when you can use that roster spot for another player at a position of need? Same thing with Deonte Banks. Deonte Banks lost the starting job to Cordell Flott, fair and square. The only reason why Deonte Banks played the other night against Denver was because Paulson Adebo got hurt. But Deonte Banks, as we have seen too many times, when he goes in the game, bad things happen. Why continue to hold roster spots for these guys if they're not working out? And, Banks has had, this is his third year. Evan Neal is on year 4. If they are not working out, move on. Who cares if they're first-round picks? You made a mistake. Admit it. It happens. All right? But yet, they continue to hold on to these guys. For what reason? I don't know. Maybe they think magically they're going to develop into, an all-pro. It hasn't happened yet. It's not going to happen. All right? It's just, at this point, I don't see it happening. So that's another one. One other mistake I want to talk about that drives me nuts is their tendency to sometimes bury guys. And then when they find that they have no other option and they need these guys, all of a sudden they realize, oh gosh, these guys are actually pretty good. All right, so I'll give you some examples. Tight end Daniel Bellinger. They buried him after his first year. Didn't get very many opportunities, and nobody could figure out why. Despite the fact that he was one of the surest catchers on the team. Cordell Flott was another one who kind of got buried a little bit. And now look at him. Jalen Hyatt, so far he's kind of been buried, but he hasn't had that opportunity to really break out, but who knows, maybe he will. And here's the funny thing, folks. Cordell Flott, Daniel Bellinger, they're both in contract years. Now you might say, well, the reason why they're playing so well is because they're in contract years. Or, hey, maybe they weren't as bad to begin with. And maybe they got buried because guys in front of them were higher draft picks or, more quote unquote established or whatever. So it's just little things like that, these mistakes that the Giants just seem to keep on making. And is it any wonder why this team takes 2 steps forward and 5 back? It's frustrating. And, maybe they don't see it. Maybe they think it's a fluke. I don't know the answer, but the evidence is certainly piling up. And I'd like to see them maybe just really step back, take a deep, long, hard look in the mirror and say, are we really doing the right thing with these processes that we have, with these beliefs that we have, with regards to player personnel, with development and all that stuff? Because I think if they sat down and they were totally honest, they would see that, there's room for improvement, a lot of room for improvement. And that some of the things they've been doing, quite honestly, have cost them games that were winnable. So we'll see. Season's going on now. I don't anticipate things will start to change now. Maybe after the season. Who knows? All right, Giant fans. Coming up next, defensive coordinator Shane Bowen is safe as of this recording. We'll talk more about that right after this.
I'm Cody Rourke from Locked On Broncos, and this episode is brought to you by Peloton. Peloton is shaping the future of fitness with the brand new Peloton Cross-Training Tread Plus, powered by Peloton IQ. This is Peloton's most advanced equipment yet, giving you real-time guidance and endless ways to move, whether you're running, lifting, or you're cross-training with your favorite instructors like Alex Toussaint. It's training reimagined to make your workout more personal. Peloton is built for breakthroughs with features that help you plan, stay motivated, and hit peak performance. You can let yourself run, lift, flex, and go while Peloton handles all the rest. Plus, Peloton IQ provides real-time strength coaching, tracking your progress and suggesting weights that challenge you so you can get stronger. Plus, the new movement tracking camera, it counts your reps and corrects your form in real time, making sure every rep is safer and smarter. So let yourself run, lift, flex, push, and go. Explore the new Peloton Cross-Training Tread Plus at onepeloton.com.
Hey, Giant fans. Mazda crafts cars for those who do more than simply move. Mazda delivers confidence with every ride, with more IIHS Top Safety Pick Plus awards than anyone else as of August 2025. You can make everyday drives feel like anything but, from smooth handling to intuitive controls. With all-wheel drive standard in every crossover SUV, you can drive with confidence through almost any season. Like our players, we sweat every detail, because when you make every move count, impossible becomes irrelevant. Mazda, move and be moved. All right, Giant fans, welcome back to Locked On Giants. I'm your host, Patricia Traina. Coming up Thursday, crossover Thursday, it'll be Lou DiBiase of Locked On Eagles and myself. We'll get you ready for this weekend's game at the House of Horrors, a.k.a. The Link in Philadelphia, as the Giants try to make it a sweep over the Eagles. I mean, can it happen? We'll see. I mean, we'll see how the week of practice goes, because there's still a lot of questions that still need to be answered. Also on Thursday at 1 o'clock, it's the Giants Squad Show hosted by Jay Berman, featuring yours truly and former Giants cornerback Mark Collins. It's an hour long. We kick things off at 1 o'clock on Thursday. It's a live stream. Do come and join us for the discussion and just to check things out. Mark's really great, by the way. Gives a lot of good insight as a former player. So hope you will check that out if you haven't already done so. All right. So for those of you who were kind of, hoping that the Giants would move on from Shane Bowen after that historic meltdown against the Denver Broncos, head coach Brian Daboll, in speaking to the media on Monday, said he wasn't thinking about making any changes to his staff. Now, before I get into what I'm going to say, that doesn't mean that he won't wake up tomorrow and change his mind. But here's the thing. Usually game planning for the next week's opponent starts on a Monday night and it goes all through Tuesday being the players' days off. So if they were going to make a change, you would have thought they would have made it. They still could on Tuesday, but I don't think that they will. I think maybe what they will do, considering that Bowen's plan worked against the Eagles in the first meeting, they will keep him on. Here's, though, what I'm concerned about with the decision. And I just want to, quick say, I don't normally advocate for guys to lose their jobs. I've had situations where I've lost jobs and it's not fun. So I don't really wish that on anybody. But that being said, you look at the Giants defensive players and they are getting frustrated with what they are being asked to do. Right? Brian Burns, after the Broncos game, was livid. He was very vocal. He was full of emotion after the game. He was upset. Dexter Lawrence was upset. All right. So here's the problem with keeping Bowen. If he is losing the confidence of the players in that on the defensive side of the ball in that locker room, that ain't good. Okay. If you lose your players, then you run the risk of there being freelancing. You run the risk of there being a mutiny. You run all kinds of problems. And you know what? Even though we're talking about a coordinator, that could trickle up to the head coach. And that could start to create problems in the locker room. Now, I will say this. The Giants have a group of professionals in the locker room. The defensive players, the Dexter Lawrences, the Brian Burnses, the Bobby Okerekes, they are professionals. They understand that you're not always going to get what you want, that, your boss is going to ask you to do things that maybe you don't agree with. But when the results aren't there and you are putting your body on the line every single week and you have nothing to show for it at the end of the day, you don't think for a minute that those guys aren't going to be upset and they're going to start to speak out and start to, raise some questions with the head coach? You don't think that maybe there's a possibility that they're going to say, well, we're out here and we're getting beat up physically, and this guy is being allowed to continue to run us into the ground, and we're not having anything to show for it? That, folks, is a concern. It's a legitimate concern. Players talk to one another. And oh, by the way, here's the other thing. You don't think that come free agency, these players who talk to other guys on other teams don't share this information about what a system's like, how good it is, how good the coaches are, and so on and so forth. So there are widespread ramifications if all is not well in a locker room. But Brian Daboll has faced, adversity before as a result of losing. He has, from what I have been told, an open door policy with his players. If they want to come up to talk to him about something that's bothering him, bothering them rather, they can. But at some point, you can come up and you can say, hey, look, we don't really care for what Shane's doing. He's not listening to us. He's not as aggressive. But at the end of the day, if nothing changes, then what's the point of having an open door policy? Now, Daboll, I believe, is of the opinion that things will straighten out, that everybody needs to do a better job. During his call with the media on Monday, he said it wasn't just one guy. It was a collective effort as to why that team fell apart in the fourth quarter. And, to a degree, he's right. He's right. I mean, you can blame it on Shane Bowen, but it wasn't all on Bowen. There were some execution issues. But here's the age-old question, kind of like the chicken or the egg. Were the execution issues because the coordinator didn't put the guys in the best position to be successful? Or he did, and the players just had brain blips and weren't in the right position to get things done? That's another question that Brian Daboll, who is in charge of his staff, nobody's going to necessarily force him to fire people or hire people. He's got to look at the mirror and say, do I really have the right guy in place here? And, the defense, you look at the rankings of the Giants defense in all the macro categories and the situational football categories. They are worse this year than they were last year. And this is with more talent that was added. So is it the talent, the coaching, a combination of both? Probably is a combination of both, but you know what? I would tend to say it's probably a little bit more the schemes, because I have long questioned that whether Bowen is a good fit for the talent the Giants have. Doesn't mean that he's a bad defensive coordinator, but is he the right guy? And I go back to when they were looking to hire a new defensive coordinator. And if you remember, Bowen was not the first choice. The first choice, I believe, was Anthony Weaver, who I think went to Tennessee. So when you start having to settle for choices 2, 3, 4 on your list, now, maybe it's not quite an ideal match. The other question I always had about Bowen, yes, he had a good run defense in Tennessee, but he also worked for a defensive-minded head coach in Mike Vrabel. So much like Mike Kafka is working for Brian Daboll and he's running Brian Daboll's offense, is it fair to wonder if Bowen, when he was down in Tennessee, did he run Vrabel's defense? All right. Up here in New York, Bowen is running his own defense, whatever he learned along the way. And again, is it a fit? Is he experienced enough to say, okay, you know what? Maybe this concept doesn't quite fit the talent. I'm going to tweak it so that it better fits the talent. Well, you be the judge of that. What do you think? Have the results been there? Not as often as they should be. But as of now, they are going forward with Bowen. Whether that changes, we'll see. But I don't think it will this week. If it does, I'll have an emergency podcast for you. We'll talk about it, but I don't think it will happen this week. Okay, coming up next, what about Brian Daboll? Is he officially safe because of Jackson Dart? We'll talk about that right after this. Hey, Giant fans, the NFL season is here, and FanDuel is making sure that you're ready for kickoff with a can't-miss offer. Right now, new customers can bet just $5, and if your bet wins, you'll get $300 in bonus bets to use across the app. I love using FanDuel because it fits however you like to bet. Player props, building a same-game parlay, or even jumping in live as the action unfolds. So are you ready to play? Download the FanDuel app right now by visiting FanDuel.com to get started. That's FanDuel.com to place your first $5 bet. Welcome back, Giant fans, to Locked On Giants. I'm your host, Patricia Traina. And in this segment, let's talk about Brian Daboll for a moment. And is he safe? Did he buy himself another year because of Jackson Dart? Now, you would think so, because Jackson Dart was always his ace in the hole, so to speak. Like what Mark Collins always says on the squad show, the Giants squad show, the break glass in case of emergency option. Jackson Dart is a keeper, the real deal. Handpicked by Daboll. Daboll has been very active in his development. Daboll has come to rely on that young man, to run his offense, to make the right decisions, and Dart has delivered. And oh, by the way, Dart has a certain degree of moxie that matches Daboll's energy. So with all that said, despite the fact that this team is once again witnessing its season circling the drain, does Daboll have another year? Does he get another year from owners? I don't know that that's necessarily a slam dunk. I mentioned some of the mistakes that partially were Joe Shane's faults, partially are Brian Daboll's thing. But there are other things that I would question about, Brian Daboll. Now, I do think he's not a horrible coach, but the one thing I just wonder about, why is it that he couldn't get this type of play that the Colts are getting out of Daniel Jones? Was it because Daniel wasn't his guy and he tried to make it work, even though it wasn't, he wasn't his handpicked guy? I don't know. Possibly. They always say that with a coach, when he handpicks a player, that there's a lot more invested in that player and making the relationship work. So you have that. You also have, the offensive struggles of recent years. Now, lately, the Giants' offense has been a little bit better. The running game has been better. They finally decided to get the tight ends involved, so the passing game hasn't been, too bad without Malik Neighbors. Obviously, Malik Neighbors is the difference maker, but the passing game has been decent enough with Dart. But, you look at some of the things that Daboll does, with Dart, running this kid left and right, And especially knowing that this kid is tough and he's getting beat up. And it's just like every week you sit there and you say, oh my gosh, is he going to come out of this game unscathed? Or is he going to take a hit and just totally, have to miss time? I go back to when Pat Shurmur was here. And if you remember, Pat Shurmur handpicked Daniel Jones. And that wasn't enough to save him. Pat Shurmur wasn't a good head coach. Brian Daboll, this is a hard one because do we really know what this Giant team is? One week they look good and we're all optimistic and we're full of hope that things that they finally turned the corner, and then they do something stupid that costs them games. I mean, if you look at it, you could have said, all right, they should have won the Dallas game in overtime. They should have beaten New Orleans, who was just absolutely dreadful. They should have won this game against Denver. And their record could have easily have been a lot better than what it is today, 5-2. Okay? It would have been a 5-2 record if they had won those games. But as I always say, woulda, coulda, shoulda, didn't. My biggest thing is I don't know, and I'm speaking for myself here, who are these Giants? Are they the powerhouse we saw against the Eagles a couple weeks ago? The bumbling, stumbling idiots we saw against the Saints? The, scared play not to lose group that we saw against Denver? It just seems like every week we're seeing a different personality, despite the fact that they preach, tough, hard, smart football, fundamentally sound. We don't see that consistently. And I think that, to me, is the biggest alarm that I have right now about this team, the lack of consistency. So just kind of going back to the Daboll question, do I think he gets another year, despite the record apparently not heading for a happy ending? I think he's going to make the argument, yes, look at what I've done with Jackson Dart. Oh, by the way, I didn't have Malik Neighbors, and look at what I did without Malik Neighbors. I think he'll get another year. Should he? That's up for debate. I think if I'm ownership and Daboll, goes through the rest of the season, doesn't make any changes on his staff, if I'm ownership, I say Bowen's got to go. And maybe there might be a couple of other assistant coaches that I might, urge Daboll to get rid of. So it's going to be interesting, folks, because this team right now, the bottom line with this team is, who are they? I don't have an answer for you. All I know is that one week they look great, and we're sitting here and we're like, enjoying the euphoria from a win that they're not supposed to have, and then they do something stupid, and it's like, same old Giants. So until we know who these Giants are, I fear we're in for more of the same. All right, Giant fans, that's going to do it for this edition of Locked On Giants. As always, thank you for spending part of your day with us here. The NFL season is here, so for your next listen, go get a double dose of the Locked On NFL podcast. Tyler the Madman Rowland gives you a shot of espresso to start your football day, while Tony Wiggins takes you into the barbershop for the smoothest breakdowns to end the day. Find Locked On NFL on YouTube or wherever you listen to your podcasts. All right, Giant fans, that'll do it. I'll see you tomorrow with an all-new episode of Locked On Giants.